Today, we are so honored to welcome one of the nation's foremost leaders in the fight against modern day slavery and human trafficking. For decades, Congressman Chris Smith has led bipartisan efforts to protect vulnerable women, children, and families from exploitation. His work has helped shape some of America's most significant anti trafficking laws and strengthened protections for victims both here at home and around the globe. Human trafficking is one of the greatest human challenges of our time. It really affects every single community, every socioeconomic level, every region of our country. And at Lynn's Warriors, we believe prevention, education, strong laws, and survivor centered solutions must remain national priorities. Congressman Chris Smith, thank you for your extraordinary leadership and for joining us today on the Warriors. I am completely honored to have you join us.
Lynn, I'm honored to be on your show. I thank you for your leadership. It's extraordinary, and being a fellow New Jerseyan, it's certainly great to be on the same screen with you. But again, I appreciate your work so much, and we are trying to make a huge difference on ending this modern day slavery, and it can be beaten. It can be stopped. Maybe not all of it, but most of it, if we just apply every lever at our disposal to prevent, to prosecute, and to protect, the 3 Ps.
That's a good jumping off point, but I want to share with our warriors listening a little bit more about you. And I'm going to admit something I never admit, Congressman Smith. I had a hard time with you because I could talk to you for hours, days. Your body of work, there's such a wealth of information to share. And rest assured, in the body of this video, I am going to have everything about you, so everybody can read along about everything you're doing. But let me say, first of all, you truly are a warrior. You're a fighter. You mentioned New Jersey. You know what? It takes New Jersey to get the job done. I'm just going to say that, okay? Right. But you're widely recognized as really the leading voice, I'm going to say, in human trafficking. And you authored the landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, the first comprehensive federal law to prevent trafficking, protect survivors, and strengthen criminal penalties against traffickers. You're the author of 5 major anti-human trafficking laws, including the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act, which authorized hundreds of millions of dollars to strengthen America's response to sex and labor trafficking. We don't talk about labor trafficking enough, I think, in our country. But anyway, Congressman Smith also sponsored the first reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act and has dedicated decades of public service to protecting the most vulnerable. Congressman Smith was first elected to Congress in 1980 and took office in January 1981. And I can't even believe this, but you'll fill us in. As of 2026, you have served 45 years. Am I correct with that? I think I am.
Oh, yeah.
45 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, and you are serving 23rd two-year. You are in the 23rd two-year term. I can almost not say the words. You are the longest serving member of Congress in New Jersey history, and among the longest serving current members of the House. Absolutely incredible. I'm going to say to you, I want to just jump in and start with something. First of all, what inspired this lifelong mission, your commitment, your dedication to this human trafficking, and why has it remained such a priority for all these decades?
Well, it all comes out of my faith. My wife and I actually met in the pro-life movement in 1972. And we worked, I was the executive director of the New Jersey Right to Life Committee. And I very quickly saw that politics, especially Congress, was a place where on a whole myriad of human rights issues, you could make a difference. Religious freedom, combating human trafficking, defending unborn children from the violence of abortion, and a number of humanitarian initiatives, global food security, the first 1,000 days, making sure that mother and baby have enough nutrition so that both can thrive. And that starts from the moment of conception to the second birthday. And it's the most transformational time in the life of all of us. And without it, you get stunting and you get a lot of other problems, cognitive problems that go along with lack of proper nutrition. I do work on a lot of issues dealing with maternal health, including obstetric fistula repairs. I wrote a legislation on that is now current policy. I'm working on a number of another issue called Safe Passages, which is all about making sure that women in the final 3 months of their pregnancy have access to a skilled birth attendant and safe blood and other helps so that she can get through an obstructed delivery, and this is especially relevant in rural areas and in the developing world as well. And that will make transformational. It'll make all the difference if we get that. I have a bill pending on that. But on trafficking, in 1995, 96, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, just a few years into it, we saw that the Soviet apparatchiks, the KGB, and all these other nefarious individuals were actually selling women and human beings, but women especially, in addition to drugs and guns. And it was horrible. And what we did was I realized I did my first bill on human trafficking. It passed the House, went over to the Senate. It was on child labor trafficking, and then it failed. They wouldn't take it up. On the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, that took a full 3 years to get enacted. You had a lot of people telling me it was a solution in search of a problem. And I said, wait a minute, if it is, then why don't you support it anyway? But it wasn't. It was a tip of the iceberg using drugs. And in an entitlement society where women become commodities to be sold, very quickly, traffickers realize they can make so much money by buying and selling vulnerable people, and they often use drugs and the threat of coercion and going after their families as a way of keeping people from women and others from going to the police. So it's a huge, huge problem. The TVPRA has resulted from 2000 in 5,200 of the worst going to prison. Maxwell, who worked with Jeffrey Epstein, she's in prison pursuant to my law. They prosecuted under the TVPRA. He was being prosecuted, Epstein that is, under that law as well. We also put into our law, the original one, that we wanted states to pass similar laws, so you would have more prosecutors, more eyes and ears, and hopefully committed individuals to rescue, to get the police at every level, from state police to local police to federal, involved, including ICE, and they're very involved in mitigating trafficking and combating it, and get everybody on the same page so that you prosecute domestically, locally, and you also prosecute on the federal level via the U.S. Attorney. So it's an all-out effort to combat this heinous crime where these women are raped over and over and over again. Drugs usually, and I know many of the victims, they're backing our bill. So many of those victims who are now the advocates. And Lynn, I can't tell you how inspiring they are. Our bill now, the newest one, is totally trauma informed. We found out from them, what do you need to first of all, free yourself somehow through law enforcement, of course, from this, but also how do you get the kind of reconciliation? Because so many of these victims blame themselves. You're not to blame. You had a thug who did horrible things to you every day, and you're a victim. And what we want to do is say there's hope. And so often it is religion, faith. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. It is faith that helps them really get to the final point where they have peace. And they have a peace that surpasses all understanding. And they are the ones that are the greatest advocates on earth in promoting protection from this heinous crime.
Let me share with you, I'm also Catholic, so we can discuss that. That's a whole nother program. We can discuss that. But I'm glad you brought up about we need, my organization, the work you do. I haven't been trafficked, right? We can't do this work unless we have survivors at the helm, leading this survivor-led and sharing so bravely and courageously their stories, what goes on. And as you pointed out, they didn't even know they were being trafficked or victimized. I know. And then it goes to a whole nother thing, psychological damage and all that. But you are correct in saying in 2026, it has improved. We now have just in the 8 years I've been doing this, more survivors at the table, more all the time leading organizations. So that is a must. We need their voices to help our work with all of this. I'm going to take you back a little bit now. Stick with me here because I jump all around. Let me ask you something. Before we get into a couple of pieces of legislation, how do you and your beautiful wife, Marie, I know you've worked together over the decades, right? This is heavy work. This is hard work. How do you take care of yourselves? I really mean this, Congressman. Sometimes in the middle of the night, things pop in my head, out of the blue.
That's a good question.
But I'm very serious about, answer it, don't answer it, but it's a lot. You may not even realize you're so in the motion all the time of doing this, get the job done. How do you take care of yourselves, your family?
Well, my wife is my greatest friend on earth, and without her, I would not be doing this. She's been the inspiration on all of these issues. I love to write speeches. I write them all the time. I always give them to her, and she rewrites them, and they come back 10 times better. And that makes a difference. And even on like the pro-life issue, you know, we deal with survivors there all the time. Pregnancy care centers, which are God's gift to the world, and some of those women too are survivors of the abortion. And it's all about, you know, loving both mother and child. And that's, so we've gone through, you know, a lot of difficulties. Obviously in politics, you'd go through them. How do we get through it all? Prayer. That's it. The love we have for each other helps. Our family is very supportive. We have 4 children and 9 grandchildren. All of that is extraordinarily, you know, supportive. But frankly, it's all about cracking open the Bible. You know, some of the things I love the most are scriptures that say, like, run with endurance the race fixed before you, fixing your eyes upon Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith. If I look down at, like Peter looked at the water that was rushing around and he started to sink, I start to sink. It's not until I say, Lord, it's in your hands. I'm not sure what to do. How do we cope with this? And in this place, Congress, there's so much of that, so much duplicity, you know, so much just things that you gotta just pray for them too. Pray for those who persecute you. The Psalms. I mean the what do you call it? The Sermon on the Mount, which I just love.
Yes.
And then I do read. My favorite Old Testament scriptures are the Psalms, and Psalm 37 and 73 are my 2 favorite. Do not fret over evil doing, and only leads to evil doing. And I love it when David got so hard pressed. He says, I almost lost my way until I came into the sanctuary of the Lord. Then I perceived their end. So he got his perspective back. And frankly, I need a recalibration every day of the week to get my perspective back. But it's always about prayer and rosary, church, praying with others, starting with my wife and family, but also with colleagues. We have a number of very, very faith-filled people here on Capitol Hill, like Robert Adderholt and others who are just full of the Holy Spirit, and that helps big time. You know, we help each other during these hard times. So prayer is the greatest way of persevering. And I love what Solomon started off with when he said, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your path straight. So when I think I'm really going to, I got to trust you with all my heart. You know, we have an understanding, but I'm not going to lean on it. I'm going to lean on you, Lord. And I also have a very strong commitment, as does my wife, to Our Lady of Guadalupe. You know, and I love my Protestant friends and, you know, and evangelicals. They don't always get it, why we see the Blessed Mother as an intercessor who just loves us and wants good things to happen. And so we pray, you know, for her intervention. Of course, above all, we pray to the Lord Jesus.
Yeah, I like that answer. And, you know, thank you for sharing that, because it's not really an answer you really hear a lot in the media, right? We don't get to speak about it that often, to be honest, or we're told not to speak about it. Well, frankly, I kind of speak about what I want, but thank you.
No, you're the only person that ever asked that question, so thank you.
Well, you know, but it's true, and I call it, you know, you always feel better. It's a very simplistic analogy. When you walk out of church after Mass, you always feel better. You just always feel better. You light a candle, you always feel better. Just the little simple things like that. So,
Lynn, and you know, I remember reading a book, and it's certainly with the 250th anniversary, certainly germane and on point, called The Light and the Glory. And it talked about how our founders had such a profound faith. That's what got them through it. You know, it's like, how did they do it? Well, that's why. And as I've worked on religious freedom all over the world, I remember being in China, meeting with this wonderful, wonderful Bishop Xu of Baoding. He had spent 30 years in the gulags there. They called him the Lao Guy. He had been tortured. They let him out. I met with him in Beijing. He got rearrested a couple of years later. A martyr like you can't believe. And he had nothing but love, even for his persecutors. And I'm thinking, I get a bad editorial, and I'm getting all upset. He was totally harassed, tortured, and as part of the Catholic Underground Church in China, and just what an inspiration. A person. I read Torture for Christ. years ago, 1981, Richard Wurmbrand in Romania, and I got involved with religious freedom after reading it. He said to all of us in the West, speak out and do it boldly and effectively for the persecuted brethren. And now you'd say, is it Nigeria, China, all these other places where obviously they're suffering and being killed for their faith. We have to speak out.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I love it. I feel New Jersey in the room. I'm feeling it.
I feel it with you too. I love Jersey.
I feel it.
Strong.
Okay. Exactly, Jersey Strong. Well, let me ask you. So you authored the landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And it's true. I've heard you speak many times. You know, I've been in the room. It's true at this time, right? And you started, you said, in the later 90s and all that. There were no laws for trafficking. Am I correct? No. Nobody was really speaking about it. And it wasn't even considered a crime. So talk about, I'm very serious when I say this to you, like, this is so transformative. This entire, 2000 was not that long ago, really.
Yeah, 26 years ago. It's not very long at all. You know, we found in looking, there was really nothing on the books. It was crazy. We had the Mann Act, which has to do with prostitution, which is weak and ineffective. And I talked to several U.S. attorneys while I was working on concept phase. And I would mention trafficking. They said, oh, drugs. And they'd mention weapons. Nobody ever mentioned human beings. So we wrote the law, and it became, I think, a historical pivot point for the United States. And we also have what we call the TIP report. It's a domestic law. It also equally applies internationally. And we have a thing called the TIP report.
We're getting there. We're getting to the TIP report.
Okay. But it has all these things in it, and a very heavy I mean, the hotline is in there. Everything's in there. And now we're just building on it, improving it, and finding what did we miss? What are lessons learned? And the newest bill is all about a whole bunch of lessons learned because it is trauma informed. We talk to people like Gina Cavallo. Gina is from our state. She's just amazing. She was trafficked, and her faith, she exudes and radiates the love of Christ. And yet she wants to stop this yesterday. And because she knows, because she lived it, what it's like.
Yeah. Gina is an amazing
Gina, woman. Right?
I know Gina. It was just her birthday. I think it was yesterday. I wished her a happy birthday.
Oh, that's great.
Also with New Jersey human trafficking, she's very involved with all of that. We've got the FIFA going on right now, involved, in all of that. She is an amazing leader with all of this as well. I want to ask you about, so you've authored 5 major anti-trafficking laws, right? How has it changed? Because I want our warriors listening to understand, because what we talk about, because we know all this stuff, kind of like we're in it every day. We talk about it, right? The public. Explain really what has changed in the 2+ decades from when you started. You touched upon survivors are now involved, survivor leaders, but your personal, opinion and your work, what's changed?
Well, I think in an entitlement society where people, especially men, think they can do anything to any woman, it leads to a dehumanization process. It turns, like I said at the beginning, women into commodities to be exploited, and it's done over and over. You put alcohol or drugs into it for the abuser as well as for the victim, and it's a very combustible, terrible outcome there as well. And then you get, people go into like the games, the World Cup or whatever it might be, and everyone's partying and drinking too much, and next thing you know, they're being part of a trafficking scheme and having someone who is a slave. She can't leave without being beaten or killed, or a family, either here or overseas. And so it's like the internet has also caused major demand, if you will, not only for the buying and selling, but the proliferation of pornography, and the abuse there has just led to a lot of very psychologically damaged abusers who live out the very cruel things that are depicted. So the nexus is very real between the two, pornography and I remember I was very involved with the Pornography Commission that was named after Ed Meese, and he did a great job during the administration back in the 80s. And the Democrats were all against it. I can't believe it to this day, because I offered the amendment to implement their findings, and it did all become law as part of a criminal law uh, and there was set up a task force that was going after child pornography and the like, and it was off and running. It was just doing a great job. In comes Bill Clinton, and he disbands the task force at the DOJ. And for 8 years, there was no enforcement of our laws that we had just passed during the Bush administration, the first Bush, and even Frontline with PBS did a big 2-hour special on it once. And I'll never forget Pat Truman, who ran that task force from Minnesota. He actually ran for Congress. He was a great lawyer. He worked for AUL, a pro-life group. Just a great guy. He was getting conviction after conviction after conviction, and then it was disbanded. And as he put it, this was an engraved invitation to the pornographers / traffickers because there's no enforcement of our laws. And that was, beyond words, horrible. And we didn't have the trafficking laws, but we did have the anti-pornography laws. Now we have both. We have, really, FBI does a good job trying to find out what's going on and to get into these chat rooms. But it's an ever-present, maybe only, a mass conversion of people to God, to have a change there of heart will ultimately change. But meanwhile, we need good law enforcement, eyes and ears everywhere to make sure that again, always putting the victim first, second, third, fourth, and fifth to make sure that we do everything humanly possible. And we don't. Very often there's a great law sitting there, but soft on the implementation. And we saw that during the Biden administration across the board, particularly on illegal immigration, which was a conduit for so many children, especially, but
that's
women
what I want to talk about. That's what I want to talk about.
Sure. I'd love to get into that.
Well, first I want to start with, I just think the internet, right? Thrust upon all of us in the 90s. Nobody chose it, right? We thought it was new, innovative. It's going to help everybody. Right. And here we are 30 years later, because the birth is really considered of the internet like 1996. But now, 2026, we have learned, and we have studies, and we have whistleblowers that have worked at these big tech companies, and we have the harms to kids and families. Yes. I think, Congressman, it is just normalized, and people have come habituated with the pornography, with the sexual content, with this CSAM, this child sexual abuse material. People who may not, probably would never get involved in any of this because algorithms and things are feeding them. They're getting involved in it, and they're just like frozen. They think it's normal. We work with a lot of kids too. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but I just want to go back on something. Now, this is a question I never have an answer to. So if you don't have an answer, it's okay. Somebody like Bill Clinton coming in, just banning things. Like, why is that? Is it always that same thing? I'm constantly hearing freedom of speech and all this stuff. Why do they do that when they know these are harms, to children and to all people? I'm very serious. Is it that bottom line? Just there's a lot of money involved? Because that's a crass answer, but that's usually the answer, money, right?
Without a doubt, that's part. Yeah,
it's power. Like they can disband things.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, the Googles of this earth, what they do in terms of facilitating pornography is outrageous. Everywhere you look, the pornography. And I remember we had a big fight to take the pornography out of the PXs, out of the for the military. And I remember the 2-star general that was in charge of it. I had a bill that would stop it, and we got it passed. But I got criticized in my press like I was like a prude, like I was a jerk. And I remember saying, these women are being exploited. This is not healthy, especially for kids. And so it was an eye opener to me, just how much pushback I got. I had editorials in my own papers back home in Trenton making fun of me for it. It was like, this is. The Pornography Commission was, people like Dr. Dobson was on it and others. They did a wonderful job. Henry Hudson was a U.S. attorney across the way from here, and he was putting people away for it. He was a great prosecutor. Frank Wolf was very much involved with it, a good friend and colleague. So we did all this work, and then of course we had 8 years of nothing burger from. I asked Bill Clinton directly about that on the phone, and then I saw him at the picnic that's held for families all the time, and I never got an answer. I remember I said, Mr. President, we need to go after these people. They're exploiting, and it's violence. it's rape. What are you doing? And well, let me take a look. He just never did anything, which was on that issue, and it was very, very disconcerting. Even on the trafficking bill, he did sign the first one, TVPA.
Yeah.
But we thought he was going to pocket veto it. There were a whole group of people in his administration, because I held all the hearings. Nobody else had a hearing on it. I had all the hearings in my committee, and we had the Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Labor, and Human Rights testify at the hearing, saying it's all counterproductive. Harold Coe is his name. He was a big Yale guy, big human rights guy, and he said this will be counterproductive. You don't need a tip report. You don't need all this stuff. Just do a little reporting and have a nice day, have an interagency task force. And I was shocked beyond words. And that held it up in the Senate for a long time. A real long time, because, the administration was pushing against it. So there were a few people in his administration that said, wait a minute, let's do something on this. And their voice, so he did sign it. And then we had to deal with George W. Bush, who at first would not implement it. So I did hearings on that, saying, please, it said you shall do this.
Yeah.
A day of delay is, for a victim, maybe their life.
Life. But do you think, Congressman, it's so overwhelming and big, and so many are complicit. Let's be real here.
Yes.
Like we're just not going to go near it, because too many.
Particularly the big corporations,
But so many are complicit. So many are making money. So we're not going to touch it. We're not going to go near it.
Look at Facebook and all these other people. They're just, it's horrible how complicit they have been in all this stuff to this very day, to this very moment. And we try to say, hey, corporate America, push back. Don't let any of your platforms be in any way exploited to exploit the people that are being depicted. And then you have the international side of it. All the garbage is coming from all over the world, including in the Philippines and elsewhere. Well, child sex trafficking / exploitation online is another major problem. So again, the World Wide Web has, facilitated this. I just wish corporate America would do a hard no and do everything they can possibly do to stop this.
They will not, because we work on that day in and day out. And right now we're working on the Kids Online Safety Act, bipartisan. Right? There's a lot going on all weekend. We've been on Zooms with senators this morning. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of dissension. There is no regulation, as you know, with big tech. They have gotten a free ticket for everything.
Forever. I know, it's terrible.
And it's the
the complicity with China, Lynn, not to interrupt.
Yeah,
but I chair the China Commission. I've been working on China human rights abuses. I've had 108 hearings on that alone, just on China and human rights abuse. How dare they, allow profits to trump basic decency and human rights protection, not just for the Chinese, because they throw them under the bus, but also for the rest of the world. I'm shocked at it. They claim that by training somehow they'll matriculate from dictatorship to a democracy. Just the opposite. They become a more powerful military state with all that technology. Plus, they get money from exploitation. I have a bill that passed 406-1, still sitting over in the Senate now for the third year in a row. It's called the Forced Organ Harvesting Act. Up to 20 years in prison if you kill a person, and there's about 60 to 100,000 forced organ harvesting body parts taken every year. Every year, from the Falun Gong, from the Uyghurs, the Muslims, and they're selling them to the Muslim countries. And this would say, okay, you're part of that. You're sanctioned, and if you're going to get an organ and you knowingly procure such an organ, you're going to prison, and so is your broker. And it would sanction, obviously, Chinese officials. That's sat over there. It was 406-1. And I've been trying to get the Senate to just take it up tomorrow. We got it passed in the last Congress.
Listen, nobody seems to, you know better than anybody, right? China seems to be off limits, because I've always worked on that TikTok.
Oh, that's another one. Exactly.
I keep saying what's going on, what's happening. This one's buying it. That one's buying it. Like nothing happens. We're a couple of years into this now. China themselves, you probably know this. They allow their children to spend 40 minutes a day on TikTok in China.
Yeah.
40, and their content,
bad influence, right?
Their content is about their history, nature, science, math, and then it shuts down. But it's good enough for our American kids scrolling infinitely, mental health disorders, And
right.
so I don't, so you have no clue about TikTok, because I'm still asking in Washington, like, what's going on with that TikTok deal? And
I know.
nobody,
The idea, even the idea that somehow
and
we
then
get
things come, Congressman, and then
yes,
things come like TikTok, and it was all over the media for a day or two. Then they just go away, and there's like no follow up.
I know. Well, it
And
is almost like this trafficking bill. I've gotten the reauthor. Trump signed, and I thank God he signed it in 2019. The Frederick Trafficking
I
Victims
was
Protection
there.
Prevention.
Wasn't that at the
I
White
know you
House?
were. That was it. That's right.
It was at a human trafficking summit, right?
Oh, that was another one. And he had the big summit for the 20th anniversary. Exactly.
I don't know, but I've been in the room with you so many times. I don't know.
Yes.
I remember he signed it, so I was there somewhere. I don't know,
He
but
was
I remember
You were
but
there.
2019 is a long time ago now.
And we're out of date. Many of these things, we have provisions in this, again, all trauma informed. We found out, and I've been finding this, I hear it all the time from the victims, that if they have no place to live, no apartment, no something, they're re-trafficked. So we have $35 million each year for 5 years, no new money from all existing housing money. So it's all, we say this is a priority under our existing program. So nobody can say you're breaking the bank. But if we can't prioritize for some woman, and they're almost all women, who wants to get her life back and maybe get a job someday, get help, maybe get some education or back to education, to have a place, that's safe that she could, live in.
Put her head on a pillow, because that's what they tell me.
That's it. That's what they tell me too.
Will say to me that I could just be under a roof with a pillow and be left alone, like a safe space.
And that's what this does. That's one of the provisions. We also have a K through 12 situational awareness program for our elementary and secondary school kids, totally age appropriate, just about what to look out for. How do you know when, this guy's being a little too friendly, he's trying to befriend me, or whatever it might be. Next thing you know, the drugs come out. Next thing you know, you're in Atlantic City being trafficked. That's how it works. And it happens all the time. And so we want these kids to be empowered to protect their own lives and the lives of their friends.
I mean, absolutely. Okay, we're going to go back to that one. So I want to ask you now, let's talk about, you mentioned before, another question I'm asking a lot of people in Washington. So we had everything, these open borders with Biden and all these kids coming over, people coming over. We had hundreds of NGOs working, making government money. It was supposed to be vetting, or, Border Patrol agents would tell me things, right? I wasn't there, but they would report things to me. And then we would hear, I would hear different numbers than I heard ever in the media. I would always hear larger numbers of these kids being brought over. I would hear a white truck would pick up 30 kids at a time. A man would drive up. And I'm like, who's vetting them? What's going on here? Never answers. So fast forward. I know you sat at hearings, right, where they were talking about these 85. The number was always changing, because it was 85,000. You can you're the expert with this one. Fill us in about those hearings at that time.
Sure.
And I'm very serious about this, because I still want answers. Like, I don't know. I think there's probably 1 million plus unaccompanied minors. This is me. I don't know this for a fact, around our country that have just disappeared, and and they're not accounted for. So tell us about the hearings. Give us a little taste of what was that like.
Sure. I started asking questions of the Biden administration, and then I held a series of hearings, 2 really important hearings, where we had the administration come and testify, and a number of NGOs as well, to speak to how many kids are there, unaccompanied minors, where are they, what is your vetting process, and it was crickets. They wouldn't say how many kids there were.
I watched it. I remember watching it.
And the New York Times were the ones who they gave us that first number of 80,000, which was far, they gave credibility that we are saying something that is very true, but it's far in excess of that, 400,000 or more, maybe even 1 million, like you said. But it was like, and then I said, in the vetting process, I'm a big pro-adoption person. I've written laws on that too, including tax deductions for non-recurring expenses. Put it into the Contract for America years ago to make it 5,000, and then one of my colleagues on the Senate side made it 10,000. It was fantastic. So I really believe in adoption. I think it's it's a beautiful way for a child to. But we do a home study. We make sure that the prospective adoptive parents are properly vetted, to make sure that child is not going into a harmful situation. None of that happened. I'll say it again. None of it happened during the Biden administration, and they wouldn't even tell us. Mayorkas was in charge of it, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and he was crickets, wouldn't say anything. And they just said, oh, yeah, it's all being done. I said, why don't you apply at least a semblance of what we do for adoption? Maybe not a full home study, but make sure that person who's got the truck outside really is his uncle and their uncle, or whatever it might be, and that they're going to a safe place. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't tell us. Thankfully, under the Trump administration, my hat comes off big time. Mark Wayne Mullen and the others, they're doing a magnificent job. Finding these kids. Over 145,000, 146,000 have already been found and reclaimed, and hopefully they'll find them all. But how many are potentially dead? Traffickers are horrible people. They not only exploit, rape, and all that. Sometimes they just kill. And they do it through drugs usually, or beatings. And how many of these kids now have not made it? So this all goes to the doorstep of Joe Biden and Mayorkas and Harris and all the others who just looked the other way. She was the czar for the border. What an incompetent job she did.
It
was
I don't
horrible.
need to laugh. I laugh because it was so blatant.
So
And it was so, they just didn't do anything. They just smiled
And
at
that's what I said. Apply to what we do
nothing.
for adoption to some extent, and at least let us know how many kids, where are they,
And we'll
welfare
try to,
whereabouts, welfare
try to
whereabouts.
and you're
But
very
I gotta
correct.
say,
Yeah.
this administration, I can't say it without enough exclamation points. And Mark Wayne Mullen is like, man, he's going for it. To try to find every one of these kids and rescue them. And maybe, God willing, even repatriate them with their families, but get
Yes.
them to a safe place.
But they are. And where do they take this 146,000 that they said? Are they taken to foster homes, group homes? Because I'm gonna tell you may not like
That's a
this
great
when I
question.
say
Yes.
you,
Yep.
I work with a lot of people, now adults, even my age, younger. We do a lot behind the scenes at the Warriors. They always tell me a lot of them, they've been re-victimized when they've been put in a foster home, a group home. They've been re-trafficked, all these stories. So where are all these kids? Because I know
Well, they
with
are
that
in a
one.
protective status, in terms of there are ways attempted to try to get them back to their families. I mean, we even had that, not with regards to the Biden administration, but we had trafficked women in my district. And we got them back in some cases to Honduras and El Salvador years ago. And it was an eye-opener to me that, boy, even in my district, we have, I shouldn't have been surprised, but we have, trafficked young women, and it was part of gangs, frankly. But they were trafficked, and they got back to their families. And, ultimately, providing the family is not an abusing family, and they do check for that. And this administration especially will check for that. Getting them there is so important. And you're right about foster homes. Very often there is a problem, particularly in the cities, where there's a lack of accountability, where these kids could be re-trafficked and abused. And but I have a great deal of confidence in Mark Wayne Mullen and the rest of this team in what they're trying to do. We had none of that during the Biden administration.
I know.
He ought to be held to account. Where's the media in holding him to account? By him, I mean,
Well, that's
Biden,
a separate program, because the media, they have certain agendas, they follow those agendas, and that's basically what it is. That's why we do what we're doing right now, where we can get out some of the truth for the public. We can share with them some of the facts, right? And talk about this open and honestly, the reality of things. And the Trump administration, I know our president is very committed when it comes to children in really doing his best to, he's a father, he's a grandfather. I mean, as for you, to find these kids, and this is unacceptable.
Exactly.
But I don't know why, I don't even know if I should say this. Why aren't these other people like going to jail or something like Mayorkas? I mean, this is so criminal, all this stuff. Or is it just we move on to the next administration and we clean it up? Because this is like cleanup in aisle 5. You know what I mean? It's like
5, 6, 7, and 8.
That's exactly right. So
the whole story.
What about
really.
that? Is there any talk of that, or we're just moving on trying to do the business at hand?
That's a great question. I don't know what the what they call what the Department of Justice is thinking along those lines. But these are gross acts of cruelty
Yes.
on the part of the administration. I mean, cruelty and law breaking. Not telling the truth.
Crimes.
I mean, how many times did Americans say the border is secure, and then Joe Biden and Harris would say the border is secure, while we're watching on television, Fox or Newsmax or whatever it might be, piles of people.
That's what I never understood. I never understood all of that, and everybody was getting distracted with all of that while actual poor people and children were coming up through horrific conditions.
Exactly.
A lot dying along the way, a lot of mothers putting 12-year-olds on birth control pills because they said, yes, my daughter will be raped. We expect it. We had the rape trees. Let's be honest here. I work with DEA also. Cartels, it's always drugs, but now they're telling me the trafficking is equaling the drugs because the trafficking's easier, and they're telling me the cartels are working in all 50 states. So nobody's exempt from the trafficking, from the exploitation. Exactly. It is happening all over, and certainly with the internet, because everybody has devices in their homes. You think your kids are safe in their bedroom because they're quiet? Well, they're on the internet. All right, now enough of that for a second, okay? But let's talk about the TIP report.
Sure.
Because I know you're in agreement with President Trump on, protecting victims. I want to drill into that a little bit more, and demanding accountability from these other countries who are failing to meet what they're supposed to do, the anti-trafficking criteria that you have outlined. This is all because of you. I hope you understand that, right? Because you might be so involved in this. Like you are the hero here who started all of this trafficking. I'm just going to remind you of that in case nobody else does. This has to be adhered to, and you're both on the same page. So we applaud President Trump for that. But talk about a little bit more about the TIP report. Explain TIP, because our listeners, they hear TIP, they might not understand trafficking in persons, what that actually is.
Well, every year, as authorized and required under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, the president and the Secretary of State have to put together a report that looks at every country in the world and analyzes it under the 3 Ps: prevention, prosecution, and protection for the victims. And there's a whole narrative in the country. There's a set of recommendations. There's a narrative on each of those 3 points. And then there's an assignment of how well or poorly they're doing in meeting those minimum standards that we prescribe in the law. And they're minimum standards, very often the complicity of law enforcement, but especially of judges and politicians across the board is what frustrates any effort to rescue trafficked victims. I remember watching a terrible thing where in India, there was a situation where all these young little girls were trafficked. As the rescuers were coming, the cops were tipped off and they got the kids out of there to go get, exploited somewhere else. It was just horrible. Then we have what we call the tier assignments: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and watch list. Now, if you're tier 1, means you're taking really significant efforts to combat trafficking and meet these standards as prescribed by our law. Tier 2 means that you are, you have a problem, but you're trying to do it, trying to fix it. You're in the process. Tier 3 means, no, you're failing miserably. You're an egregious violator. And then we prescribe about 20 or so specific sanctions we can levy on a country, denying them certain aid, including military aid. And matter of fact, when even friends like South Korea found themselves on the TIP report, tier 3, they went overboard, passed new laws in order to get off of it. I met with their ambassador and a lot of their delegation many times during that year, and they got off it. But did it by deeds. Not just words, deeds. So the TIP report is an action item. It speaks truth to power, and every embassy of ours around the world are asked a number of data points, find out how many prosecutions there were. For a while, we found that they were prosecuting, but not in a lot of countries, but not convicting. So somebody's palms were being greased, no doubt about it. So, we changed that. We updated that. We found out that peacekeepers were being involved. I was very involved with the DR Congo when our money was going to a UN peacekeeping deployment. And I went to Goma, where all these people were, and the peacekeepers the peacekeepers, the guys with the blue helmets from the UN, were actually raping little children for a very, very small amount of money. We even had a U.S. Ambassador Swing, who was in charge of it. It was a scandal. I had 4 hearings on that and went there myself. But we then added to the tip report that military deployments, including peacekeepers, whether it be African Union, UN, or whatever it might be, or also very much scrutinized to make sure they're on the side of protection and not on the side of exploitation. So, we keep learning what needs to be done to improve these standards, and I've updated them many times, a few times over these years, just to make sure we get it right. Anyone who wants, it's online. If anybody wants to go to the U.S. Department of State tip report.
I'm going to link it all. I'm going to link all this in the body of the video so people can take their time. Of course, so people can take their. I don't mean to.
But let me just say one thing, Lynn. Sometimes there's a great deal of politicization of this by certain people in the State Department. During the Obama administration, Obama and John Kerry falsified at least 14 countries and gave them a upgraded ranking. Rather than tier 3 where they belonged, they got an improvement so they weren't sanctioned. And we found out how do we know? The tip people, the bureaucrats, the good bureaucrats who were doing this work, Foreign Service officers and the like, tipped off Reuters, 3-member investigative team, who then broke the story that the tip people are saying, wait a minute, Obama is falsifying this for other reasons. And I'll give you an example. Oman should have been tier 3 for their labor trafficking and the like. They got an upgrade because they helped facilitate the deal with Iran, which was an egregiously flawed deal by Barack Obama on nuclear weapons. But they were the ones who were like the go-between and helped make it happen. Yeah. Well, improve their situation on the scorecard and sanction based on something other than trafficking. Same thing happened in Malaysia because of a trade treaty that never made it into law, but it was in the process. They got an improved grade. And some of the countries in the region say, wait, if you guys are going to falsify for some other reason, the integrity of this process. So I had 2 hearings on it. One, I blasted the Obama administration for being deceptive and for selling out the victims. Then another one, as the new report was getting ready, they're doing their data calls. I said, this time, get it right. Don't you dare falsify this. So that's an ongoing concern that we will get false information. But Obama deserves nothing but negatives for that one, because I just couldn't, to this day. I even asked John Kerry, who was then Secretary of State, at a hearing, who made these decisions? He said, well, the buck stops with me. I did. Well, you made a very serious mistake because the victims take note of that. Somehow the Americans are politicizing this. And this has to be a clean process that says, this is what the situation is. And the sanctioning part is a step 2. First step is to ascertain the reality on the ground, trends, everything. And then secondly, do you apply sanctions, or have they come forward and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And you can work with them to try to get to a better situation on the ground.
50 things just went through my head when you said that. First thing is, I guess you won't be visiting the Obama Center in Chicago. No. You won't be visiting that anytime soon. The second thing is, isn't it disgusting? We use people, kids, kind of like chattel for all these other, right? For other things. We're using human beings, but we're using human beings, people. I'm just throwing that out there because as you're talking, I'm like, we're using people. This is the exchange we're doing. This is so beyond even comprehension that anybody would think any of this was acceptable. I'll never understand any of that, especially all people, children, especially those there to protect. I don't know. I'm just going to throw this at you. I used to do a lot of things, go to a lot of events at the UN, and I stopped because I didn't want to be in any more photo ops about trafficking because they were never getting the work done, in my opinion. So I just did not want to keep going back. And there's a lot of friction with pro-life groups there, and it's in my neighborhood. I could easily walk there, but I just stopped going there because I decided I'm better my boots on the ground, behind the scenes work. I don't know if you have any opinions about any of that, want to stay away from it.
Quite a lot. Yeah. But I just study it. Yeah.
Remember, I'm no expert. You're the expert, but I'm like, every year, they don't seem to be making any progress with anything.
No, it's the anti-Semitism at the UN. I've had 4 hearings in the last 2 Congresses on that. And it is rife. Even the Human Rights Council that's supposed to, hold countries to account, it's a farce. It's an absolute farce. And it's filled with people who are profoundly anti-Semitic, anti-American as well. And so it colors everything they say. So their human rights reports are far from honest. With regards to even trafficking, when Kofi Annan was the Secretary General, and I did those 4 hearings and went over there and raised a really royal fuss about how can peacekeepers be exploiters at the same time. He did a zero tolerance policy, put out a memo and all this other kind of stuff. And then I did a hearing on that, and I called the hearing Zero Compliance with Zero Tolerance. It's like nice words, good sentiment. Where's the action? So that's been an ongoing problem. And when it comes to life issues, the UN is a wholly owned subsidiary of Planned Parenthood. They have a thing called the Sustainable Development Goals. And my wife and I worked for years. First they were called the Millennium Development, then Sustainable, a list of action items for the world with times, dates. Well, the Sustainable Development Goals are due to be achieved by 2030. And 3.7, that's where it's found, is a right to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Now, that language is abortion on demand. The World Health Organization has a whole regimen of abortion till birth. That's their recommended legislation to every country in the world. No conscience protections for any healthcare provider, doctors, OBGYNs, nurses, no conscience protection. Not even, it's all in their explicit language of what they want in every country in the world. And then they have language that talks about no waiting periods, no public funding completely. And again, it's right till birth. They're pushing the abortion pill everywhere in the world. That's the UN I'm talking about, UNFPA, WHO. Now the UN Women. Now the abortion pill, as you know, and that study that has come out a year ago, this past April, that looked at over 800,000 women who had the abortion pill, mifepristone, which is supposed to be so safe like a Tylenol. 1 out of every 11, which is unbelievable number, had either sepsis or massive hemorrhaging or some other extraordinarily bad requiring hospitalization adverse event. The U.S. government, starting with Clinton, because he brought it all over here by executive order way back when he came into the White House. He even sent his FDA commissioner to France to bring it here. Then it went to other hands, including the Chinese Communist Party, who were making it. So long story short, all these women have been harmed irreparably. No adverse event reporting, because Obama and then Biden went even further and said, don't report. Even if the woman dies, don't report. And they wouldn't report anyway, because the abortion industry is rife with cover-up. There was a guy named Willard Cates. He ran the CDC Abortion Surveillance Unit 45 years ago. And he said in a public statement that was in the Philadelphia Inquirer, why would anybody in the abortion industry, my word, but he said, in that area, report any complication? It's like turning yourself into the IRS. What good comes of it? So they cover up all the maternal morbidity and mortality. And when it comes to that abortion pill, in the developing world, it's a death sentence. She will bleed out, that poor woman, somewhere, nowhere near an emergency room because of this. And the UN is pushing that every single day. And they're pushing it aggressively. And they want to get, by the year 2030, Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, they're hoping to get universal access to abortion as close to the UN, the WHO, World Health Organization model as possible. That is frightening for unborn children everywhere, and equally for their mothers. My wife and I work with a lot of post-abortive women. We love them. They need help, reconciliation. We pray for them. But now we're seeing more victims every single day pile up all over the world. Dead babies, wounded mothers, sometimes dead mothers. And the UN is at the forefront of this.
Yes.
like I've never seen before.
It's such a
I was
crime.
at the Cairo, I was at the Cairo Population Conference, and they tried to get a international right to abortion. Bill Clinton did. And then they lied that they weren't looking for that. And I actually had the marsh, and I was on, the network television. I think it was Face the Nation with Al Gore. And he said, "Oh, I'm making it all up." I said, "Well, excuse me. Here's the demarche that came out to every mission, to every embassy around the world from our government, international right to abortion." They didn't get it. And it was the Catholic Church that stopped it, working with some others, but they took the lead. But again, the UN has never backed off. They just doubled down after the Cairo conference, which was back in 1994.
Yeah,
I was there for a week.
I think they have some new director. I mean, I stay away from them, but I got some kind of press release. A new director coming in. A new director started. Somebody who's worse than anybody who's ever been there before.
Oh,
But
yeah.
just so criminal. All right, let's talk about now. Let's talk about your Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act expanded America's anti-trafficking efforts. First of all, for our warriors listening, explain what reauthorization means.
Oh, sure.
That's
a great question. Nobody's ever asked that.
What that means.
Well, we passed the original Trafficking Victims Protection Act.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we've done since then are reauthorizations and hopefully, where it's needed, expansions. And I've done several of those. That's what this one is. This expands the original TVPA of 2000, and we named it after the great anti-slavery leader, Frederick Douglass. We actually worked with his great-great-grandson, Kenneth. He'll come. It's his great-great-grandson, particularly on the prevention side. Yeah. And what we're doing in this bill is reauthorizing all of the existing programs that need reauthorization, and there are quite a few, and we expand it in a number of other areas, like with the decent place for a woman to get shelter, the language. We put money in for prosecutions. We got to make sure that we are going after these horrible exploiters and putting them behind bars. I would even argue that when P. Diddy was prosecuted, the prosecutors did a number of laws that they prosecuted him under. One of them was the TVPA, but they also did it under the very inferior Mann Act. And it was like, what did you put that in there for? That's a slap on the wrist. We looked at that when we were writing the original TVPA and said, that doesn't do anything. You might get a couple years in prison, but it just doesn't do the job. And of course, the jury defaulted to the least part of the law that was being used to prosecute. Had the TVPA been used, he'd be in for 20 years, in my humble opinion. And you got to choose the right law to prosecute under. That's why Epstein would have gone to jail probably for the rest of his life had he not died in prison. So this bill, HR 1144, HR 1144, re-ups all these other programs, but also expands it in these areas. Even the International Megan's Law, which Megan Kanka is this little 7-year-old darling girl that lived in my hometown and where he's in Hamilton Township, which is where, parenthetically, Justice Alito is from as well, a great justice, I mean. She was killed by a convicted pedophile who lived across the street back in 1994. It led to every state passing Megan's Law, which is great, so that your coach is more vetted than, over soccer and whatever it might be. If they're a convicted pedophile, all has to be made known. And it puts all of us on, you can go online right now, put Megan's Law for your state, and you can find out where they all are. Well, we said a lot of these convicted pedophiles hop on a plane and they go and they do child sex tourism with impunity. They rent a child, they exploit them. So I wrote a bill called the International Megan's Law, and it had two things to it. The first thing was anyone who travels who's a convicted pedophile has to, not may, shall report to the U.S. government when they're going, where they're going. And it's called the Angel Watch program, and they do a wonderful job. Approximately 30,000 or more notices have been made to countries of destination that so-and-so is coming, and at least a third of those have been told, you can't come here. We don't want you. Stay out of here. We looked at whether or not we could prevent them from traveling, and we couldn't find any way legally to do that where we can at least make people aware. We also, in the law, put in a provision that said on the passport, stamped, the person, the bearer of this passport is a convicted person for committing a crime against a child. And so now border security, say in Bangkok or name the place, can look at that and say, whoa, you're not coming in. And they send them right back. So it was challenged in court. It was upheld, thankfully, but that has made a huge difference. That's reauthorized in this bill, in the Frederick Douglass Act. And again, I was inspired to do it by the tremendous work that the Kankas, Megan's grieving parents to this day.
I remember that story well.
Remember that? It was so horrible. And even the guy that killed her, raped her, and then put her in a grave, a shallow grave, he was handing out posters, papers. Have you seen Megan? I mean, what a
That's
horrible.
what they do. These ones who commit crimes, they stay like around the case so they can keep.
That's just what he did.
It's
and
a
then
lot
they
of
got him.
investigators tell me, but
Yeah.
I mean, Megan's Law also, I believe, when you buy a house or rent an apartment, you can see if there's one in your neighborhood or
You
something.
should look. Everyone should look. I mean, there's
I'm going to add
language
that.
there
I'll
that says
add that to the bottom. I'll add the link to the bottom, in the video.
that would be great.
Because
But this international Megan's Law, again, we've had so many people that we think we've cut down. We've taken some of the secrecy out of child sex tourism in these other countries, and we put a reciprocity piece in, which has not been honored as well because other countries don't have a Megan's Law. We want to know when they're coming here, so we can put up the stop sign and say no admittance. You can't come in.
Well, let me ask you, where does HR 1144, where is it standing right now today?
Great question.
What's happening with it?
Sure. Well, Lynn, it's out of committee, it's out of foreign affairs, out of judiciary, it's been waived as well out of education and labor. It passed twice in two previous Congresses with 400 votes, both times. It was blocked by Bob Menendez, who was then the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I pleaded with him. I said, Bob, I know we're different parties and all that, but for the sake of
parties, he's in prison right now.
He's in prison now.
I shouldn't laugh, but he's in prison right now.
But it has been slowed or blocked too lately, for unrelated reasons. But I did talk to Steve Scalise again, who's our majority leader, very good man. He said he's hoping to have it up on the floor within 2 weeks. So that's my hope. Now we go over to the Senate, and I have met with Senator Risch, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and I would appeal to him with all of my heart, because I did then, just bring it up. Unanimous consent, it's happened before. I mean, Trump did sign, President Trump, this bill back in 2019. I had to go through the Senate then too, remember? Just do it. Delay is denial, again, especially with the new programming that is in here for housing and prevention and more money for the prosecution side to go after the traffickers. And so you talk about being frustrated, what keeps me up, and how do I handle it? I have prayed about this bill so often, and my wife and my staff. I have great staff. Mary Vigil is one of my top staffers.
Love her.
She's fantastic. I mean, we all pull our hair out and say, what is the holdup? Stop it. And we're asking President Trump, because, he might want to do a signing ceremony. He did it last time. And when he did the 20th anniversary of the TVPRA, he had an amazing forum at the White House.
Yes.
Ivanka spoke. A number of women who had been trafficked spoke. And again, their voices more than anything else carried the day, although he was good too. He always is good. But we're asking the president, ask the Senate to bring the bill. It's going to pass in 2 weeks. Please just bring the bill up. Just do it. So I do hope
we're going to do it. We're going to do it. But then what did I hear about something about the National Defense Authorization
Well,
Act?
I'm going to
What's
great
going on
question.
there? Okay.
I'm going to add it there as well if it gets made in order. That'll be on this coming Monday. I don't know if it will. There's always a possibility of a non-germaneness issue or somebody, saying they object based on a parliamentary. I don't think it will be shot down, but I've had that happen too on so many other issues. So I'm trying both approaches. We just got to get it into law now. Delay, like I said, is denial. And again, the president's all in. President Donald Trump believes all this.
Yes,
he's fantastic. But we need his help, like pull it in, get it out of the Senate.
Yes, we
It'll be
need
there in 2
to.
weeks.
Yes, we've got to work on that. Yes, we
We
need him
really,
to say, "Go ahead, everybody, do it,"
that's right.
kind of thing. We'll work on that. Let's finish up with. And again, I could talk to you for hours, so please promise me. I know how incredibly busy you are. That you will
Well,
visit us
our
on
votes are
Warrior.
put off for today, so I don't have to run over for a vote.
Okay, so there's no. I don't know. I've been speaking to people from cars today and other places. Somebody in Tennessee, so you're not in a big rush. But
Right, right.
I want to
You've been
ask
very
you.
kind and gracious with your time. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, because I'm not kidding when I said I could talk to you for hours. So,
Thanks, Lynn.
what after leading this fight for decades, right? What do you want to say to survivors right now, to families, parents, because on a daily basis they are overwhelmed by the magnitude of this problem, or they say, Lynn, why do you even want to bother? Which, of course, just to share with you, I am a great believer. If I help one person, one child, one family a
That's
day,
right.
I've done my job. But what do you want to say directly to them, our warriors listening?
Well, there is hope, and we are absolutely committed to trying to find every means possible to protect, to prevent, and then for the bad guys to prosecute. One of the things we wrote into the original law was that anyone who has not attained the age of 18, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. That is a trafficking victim.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
And we also wrote in that on the penalty side, if the child has not attained the age of 14, life imprisonment is right there on the table to be meted out. And many of those people have gotten life imprisonment. And then after the age of 18, there has to be an element of force, fraud, or coercion. And there's almost always an element of all three. I mean, it's just amazing how it starts off with defrauding, lying, deceiving, and next thing you know, the coercion and the beatings and everything else starts. It's such an insidious process. I can't even say how bad it is. But hope, one, we have your back. We're not going to ever let up. And again, the president has your back. I do believe strongly that he wants to sign this bill and do other things. The U.S. attorney in every jurisdiction it's up to them, prosecutorial discretion wise, to decide what cases they want to go at. Elevate this even higher and go after these traffickers. They're everywhere. They really are everywhere. And again, they leave a whole long list of ruined people. Yes, there's always hope, and again with faith. This is where I'm always amazed. It's just how resilient the human soul is, but it's the infusion of grace and prayer that usually gets that individual back on her feet.
Yes,
And
most of the survivors, yes, you're correct, that we work with are very deeply religious.
So religious and
it's
so strong.
infectious. You know what I mean? It's
That's right.
infectious. You hear they've been through the worst of the worst, right? And that they can still have this belief or this calm feeling or share that kind of thing. I want to tell everybody, again, I'll have all of your information in the body of the video. chrissmith.house.gov. New Jersey's in the house, everybody. I want to say there's a lot of hope because we have you on the Hill. And I know you did a fantastic, I think it was back in April, not that long ago, you did a press conference on the Hill that you are all over these issues. Again, I've seen you in different, summits, roundtables. I saw you last August. We were in Virginia. It was the Attorney General did a summit with Tanya.
Yes, he did a great summit. Matter of fact, one of the women there came up to me and said, I got re-trafficked when I didn't have a place to live. Underscoring the need for housing.
Well, that's, we have to talk more about that also, because that's the thing I hear all the time. It's not good to have housing for 1, 2, 3 nights. I'm in New York City, where basically the housing is all allocated mostly for domestic violence victims.
Yeah.
Very few for human trafficking. Of course, I'm always fighting, Congressman. They intersect each other, the domestic violence and trafficking. So we got to open this up a little more. So there is a lot of hope, though. Again, we have you on the Hill. We have more people talking about it. We do have survivors at the table now talking about things. We have you fighting, and that is just extraordinary because of your decades of leadership and just public service. You're a true public servant. I I don't say that lightly because I've had a real lesson over the last 8 years, going to Washington and going to Albany or Trenton and meeting people. And your unwavering commitment to all of this is really remarkable. So I want to thank you for reminding us that every person, every child has such worth and value. And that's what you fight
Oh,
for.
without a doubt.
And everyone also deserves justice. And we all have a role to play. I truly believe this. In 2026, we all must and can do something regarding this exploitation, this trafficking, and this surrounding everybody. So a heartfelt thanks for you taking the time out.
Lynn, thank you for doing this and your leadership. It's amazing. And you can have such an impact, and you are. The one scripture that is the scripture that motivates me for all this human rights work, when our Lord said, whatsoever you do to the least of these, you do likewise to me. So you see a trafficking woman and say, that could be Christ. You see an unborn baby, that's the face of Christ. And it's such a motivator. It's as if we're doing it to God himself. And I, that's the scripture that my wife and I cling to. That's the one.
Well, thank you for sharing. Please promise me you will come back again soon. We've got to get this to the president. We want him to get involved. We want Congress to move. We're going to do it. I'm feeling good about it. Thank you, Congressman Chris Smith, for joining the Warriors today. You truly are a warrior.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lynn. You're a great warrior.
Thank you.